There is a wargame that has captured my wargaming life for like the last year. It was really surprising, it was really shocking, it was really unexpected, but is really good. I painted up the Skaven half of the Skaven Tide box, just on a whim because Skaven are really cool, and Nick and I decided to play a game of Age of Sigmar 4th edition. I played one singular game of Age of Sigmar 3rd edition, so I thought let's give it a shot. Let's try the Spearhead format. And after the game, we were both like, oh, that was actually pretty good. And then I played another game of Spearhead with Sean. And then we were like, oh, this is really good. And that evening, we went to the Warhammer store and we all got more Spearheads, because Spearhead is really, really good. I always thought Age of Sigmar looked pretty cool, but I never got into it because of the opportunity cost. I could work on getting an Age of Sigmar army up and running, but I could also paint a squad of intercessors and bring them in a game that weekend, or I could paint up a squad of Necrons and have them for the next Rogue Trader tournament I'm gonna play in. But Age of Sigmar Spearhead is kind of the perfect thing because you don't need a whole army. You just need a tasting. And I do want a taste of all of the different things Age of Sigmar has to offer. Skaven, Slaves to Darkness, Cruel Boys, Ogre mawtribes, Maggotkin of Nurgle, Hedonites of Slaanesh, Stormcast. I've gotten to experience just about every single army in Age of Sigmar. And I have some thoughts. Some of them I absolutely adore. Some of them I thought I would like, and some of them I had no interest in at all. And actually, I think they're really, really cool. But in all of that Age of Sigmar goodness, we've been playing on the old Skaven Tide terrain. And this terrain is fine. It's an L-wall and a fun little guy, but we've been so inspired by Age of Sigmar, we came up with some of our own, some themed around our armies. The Spearhead terrain serves an important purpose. Each player gets one long and one short piece. They decide where in their deployment zone they go, and this is the first bit of strategy you do in a game of Spearhead. And speaking of spearheads, my favorite spearhead are the Ogre mawtribes, the Tyrant's Bellow. I fell in love with these models while painting them, and then fell in love with them all over again when I played them. They are thick. I have the Tyrant that comes in the box, but I got lucky while I was starting to paint my forest. My friendly local game store had this old Finecast Tyrant, and I like them even more. And this spearhead might have my favorite Warhammer model, the enormous Mournfangs. These guys are girthy. My Ogre mawtribes are my pride and joy, and when I had completed them and played them over and over and over in Spearhead, I knew that it was a game for me. I actually played these guys in a 5-round tournament, and I won the tournament. And I fell in love with these guys so hard that I painted them really, really well, and I entered them in an army painting competition, and I won gold. I love the big, meaty boys of the Ogre mawtribes. And when we were designing some terrain to go alongside our spearheads, I knew my Ogre mawtribes had to be represented. They are the faction of destruction. And what is destruction without some good bones? We've been working on these pieces for what feels like forever, and now they are perfect. And perfectly printed in Spearhead Resin. Spearhead Resin is the best quality 3D printing resin. We have a code for you guys if you want to try it for yourself. Use EonsOfBattle to get 8% off your order of Fast Navy Gray. To start out, I need to get these bones looking properly bony, and I started with a brown base coat. I gave them a zenithal with an earth brown, and then a final highlight of tan to hit the proudest bones. Now this terrain is calling out for a wash. I grabbed some Agrex Earthshade, watered it down, and then slobbered it over everything. This did a good job of shading the recesses, but it ended up pretty dark. This was the last hurrah for my OG bottle of Agrex before Games Workshop switched the formula. That's okay, nothing I can't fix by reapplying my airbrush highlights, and I'll leave those crispy shadows in the recesses. Now to get these bones looking ancient and gnawed on. I grabbed a brush and started drawing on some fine lines across the surface, adding in more texture. Doing one layer of light brown and then another layer of tan, leaving even thinner lines. Then I moved on to picking out all the beads. I base coated these in a red, and then I mixed in more and more saturated red as I layered this up to make the beads look brighter. In a few places, I used some magenta speed paint to darken the beads and add in some shadows. Now onto the cloth, or should I say flesh. I started out base coating this with some red beige, and then glazed on some sickly green, wiping it away to leave it in the recesses. Then I took a dark red and glazed this over the seam and came back in with a wet brush to blend this out. On some of the cloth, I gave them a red base coat to match the red clothing on my ogres. Red is a tricky color to paint with, but a trick I found is to use indigo ink as a shadow color. Over the red, this turns into an almost black color that adds tons of contrast. I threw some red wash over the seam to darken them and make them look even grosser, and I dusted some raw umber ink over everything to bring the colors a little closer together. And then it was time for all the remaining things, like these little skulls. I liked Kill Team, but a lot of the teams felt exactly the same. Knife guy, better knife guy, rinse and repeat 10 times every time. And I was a little worried that Spearhead would just be the same thing but for the Age of Sigmar factions, but the Ogres proved otherwise. The Ogre Spearhead is a few big fat guys who feel big and fat. They are dense with 4 wounds and a powerful attack, and that doesn't always connect, but when they do, they demolish anything that stands in front of them. My strategy for the ogres is to make an ogre ball that moves up to the center objective and holds the line. They can take an absurd amount of punishment and dish some of it back out, and then on turn 3 onwards, the Mournfang pack and the Iron Blaster show up from the board edge, appearing from the Everwinter to rip and tear. Spearhead is played over 4 rounds, and you can score about 6 points a turn, and my ogres tend to score low early game, but then score really high late game. Spearhead is a wonderfully tight wargame, and if any of you guys are interested in Spearhead, stay tuned to hear how you can get a copy for yourself. I really like my ogres, and I really like the destruction terrain that I'm gonna play with them from now on. These guys won me a tournament, but they almost won me another little local tournament. I was going into round 3 undefeated with the most points, but I had one little misplay in turn 3 that cost me the game by like 2 points. I ended up in 3rd place. But I still really like the ogres. My next love in Spearhead was a very different faction. Yndrasta's Spearhead, and it is called in the game Yndrasta's Spearhead, so you would think it would be really good because it's the namesake. It's kinda not. The Ogre mawtribes Spearhead is really strong. These guys are not, but they're still really fun to play. Similarly to the ogres, not all the miniatures start on the board turn 1. Yndrasta and the Annihilators don't show up until turn 3, but every time they show up, they do kinda save the day, which is very on brand for Yndrasta. I feel like this Spearhead being a little bit weaker taught me a lot about the game, but it also taught me to like the Stormcast, because I painted a lot of these guys up years ago when Dominion came out for Age of Sigmar 3rd edition, and I was kinda on them. I thought they were fine, but I touched up the paint jobs and got a couple of new kits to put together this Spearhead, and now I really like them. And I got some terrain to match. In Sigmar, the factions are broken down into Chaos, Death, Destruction, and Order. And all the factions who like civilization are in Order. And the biggest, baddest of Order are Sigmar's finest, the Stormcast. The Skaventide Spearhead terrain is Sigmar themed, but taken over by the Skaven. I want a proper nice themed set for Order. I started out by priming my trees and then spraying them with a dark green. Then from above, I zenithalled everything with a cold white. I chose this color because I bought a bunch of it to use as verdigris and then found out it was the wrong color, but it'll be perfect for this. After a zenithal, I gave all the leaves a sponging of this color, brightening them up and also picking out all the leaves. This worked out really well because of how proud the leaves sit. Then I started picking out the trunk, wet blending some browns mixed with light brown all over the bark. Once that was done, I used my airbrush to brighten up the trunk, and then, feeling inspired, I started sketching on some shapes into the trunk, doing one pass of dark tan and another of bright tan. This was really fun and good practice for freehanding. Once I had my value sketch, I came back in with my airbrush, spraying burnt umber from below to tint the brushwork I did. This was super satisfying to see my lines turn bright and saturated, and from above, I sprayed a yellow paint to add in some more color. With the trunk done, I picked out the rest of the things that make up this little tree, hitting the rocks with a sponging of gray and a dry brushing of white, and then spraying a blue from underneath to tint the rocks cold, so they stand out proudly against the warm tree trunk. Then I started painting all the other things on the tree. Yndrasta's Spearhead is a tricky one to play. I need every ability to tip the scales in my favor. At the start of a game of Spearhead, players roll off and the winner decides who goes first and who picks the board. Spearhead has a double-sided board, the good and the evil. The good side is better if you're the underdog, with more healing and easier objectives to score, and the evil side favors killing and movement. Getting to pick this is strong, and I always try to play on the good side with Yndrasta. If I can hold out until turn 3 with my Vanquishers, Vexilor, and the silly little Chariot doing a good job on primary and secondary, or better yet, denying points from my opponent, Yndrasta and the Hammernators will arrive to save the day. Yndrasta is the powerhouse of this force, with a great ranged weapon in her spear Thengavar, an incredibly good close combat punch, and movement 12, she owns the board when she shows up. And the Annihilators with their 3 wounds and 2-up saves can lock down an objective, typically the enemy's home field objective. Playing Yndrasta's Spearhead taught me exactly how to use every objective card to its absolute maximum. Every victory point is an achievement, and every enemy unit destroyed is a triumph for the glory of Sigmar. My Yndrasta Spearhead looks so good next to my Order Spearhead terrain. Yndrasta. It's really not a very powerful Spearhead, but I really like to play it. Every time I play my Yndrasta Spearhead, it feels like a certain story is playing out, and that story is a small band of Stormcast Eternals getting ambushed. And it really feels like you're getting ambushed turn 1 and 2, cause you don't have that many guys, and you don't deal a lot of damage, but you hang in there and you try. And if I can manage to kill like 1 enemy unit and do okay on primary and secondary, then I've got it made, because turn 3, Yndrasta and the Hammernators fall from the heavens, and the game changes. Yndrasta throws her spear Thengavar and like snipes something, and then makes her 6-inch charge and absolutely decks an enemy unit. The Hammernators show up and are an absolute brick of 2-up save, basically 40k Terminators. They're fantastic. I don't win a lot of games with Yndrasta Spearhead, but I've won a few, and it's always tons and tons of fun. I played these guys in a local Spearhead tournament, and I came in dead last. I think another reason that I love this team so much is that Yndrasta is just really, really cool. If anyone's looking for some Age of Sigmar book recommendations, Yndrasta the Celestial Spear is really, really good. Now I've got the Order side of the Spearhead terrain done. The next thing is a little bit of death. And I don't have a death army, but a bunch of my friends do. Nick has the Flesh Eater Courts, Sean has the Soulblight Gravelords, and another friend of ours has the Night Haunt. I have played against the forces of death so many times, and this terrain is all about these deadly dead guys. I started out with a black prime and then started laying brown on the dirt. I set the PSI really low on my airbrush so that the paint was just spitting out, and I sprayed on some earth brown and then a layer of tan sprinkles. Then on all the gravestones, I sprayed these with a dark blue. I want the gravestones to look sad and gray, but not too desaturated. I mixed a little bit of white paint into the dark blue and then sponged this on to get some irregular texture. The sponging did a good job, but I feel like these headstones are really calling for some dry brushing. I added some more white paint to the blue and then started dry brushing this on. This hit on all the raised surfaces and brought out the details. I did another layer of dry brushing with more white paint mixed with dark blue, and for the final dry brush, I hit these stones with a light blue. Over top of the desaturated blue, this color is still pretty vibrant, but looks like a ghostly white. Then I base coated all the bricks with a brick red, glazing this on so that the black primer shows through. Then I glazed on a little bit of orange over the red to change up the colors a little, and then a dry brushing of a saturated red to bring out the details. Now for the grout. To get this into the cracks, I watered down some tan pigment powders and brushed this over the red. Once it was dry, I came back in with a damp makeup wedge and carefully brushed the powders off the raised surfaces, revealing the red brick and leaving the pigments in the cracks. This worked really well, and I want to find some more bricks to do this on. For the wrought iron, I started out giving these a base coat of a dark brass color. I used a dry brush to work this into the recesses, and then came back in with a gold paint and did another round of dry brushing to brighten up the metal. Now with the big things done, I picked out all the little details and decorations. I have played against the death factions a lot. Nick's Flesh Eater Courts are some interesting ghouls. They have some absolutely wicked abilities on squishy bodies. They can sometimes absolutely dominate and sometimes fold like noodles. They seem swingy, but the big Batman is an absolute monster, and because of its crazy healing mechanic, it must be killed in one blow or else you might as well not fight it. The Night Haunt are oppressive ghosts. They just float around being spooky. They don't interact like normal guys. They have strong movement, get to fly, they ignore armor-piercing rend, so it feels like you're fighting ghosts. They lack a strong punch, but there are so many ghosts that they control the board. And Sean's Soulblight are oppressive. They're very strong. The Blood Knight Cavalry will kill anything they charge, and if these things don't get dealt with immediately, the game can be over quickly. Combine that with a powerful hero, skeletons with the strongest resurrection in the game, and murder bats that show up turn 3, any game against the vampires is an uphill battle, and good luck if they get turn 1. The death factions are really interesting. They do feel different than the other factions because of how wacky their rules are and how hard they can spike. This collection of terrain has been a love letter to our new favorite wargame, and it's all available from EonsOfBattle.com. This April, we're going hard into skirmish fantasy warfare with 3 themes. The Mythical Forest, a set of fantastical trees held aloft by otherworldly levitating stones and waterfalls with the power of life. The Eternal Graveyard, a desolate shrine to the forces of death, macabre headstones piled against the last remnants of a long-forgotten cemetery. And the Cannibal Camp, a ramshackle encampment where the marauders can divide up their spoils and cook up their victims. These sets are designed with storytelling in mind. They are the right size and shape for all the popular fantasy games. You can match the theme of your army, making your beloved collection look good while dominating the battlefield. These sets are available on our website as STLs, and don't worry if you don't have a 3D printer, they are available physically printed for you. Ooh, the death terrain might have turned out the best. And I didn't even play a death spearhead. I've played as the Ghosty Goos, the Nighthaunt a couple of times, and they're really fun, but I've played against Soul Blop Bleep Blop, the Soul Blight Gravelords, Sean's army, a lot, and they're tough. I played against them this weekend with my ogres. It was a little bit of a stomping, but I had an incredible turn 4. I was down all game, I was down below 5 points, missed the double turn, but then turn 4, I scored 8 points, which is almost impossible to do in Spearhead. Still lost, but it was a good game. Age of Sigmar Spearhead is my favorite wargame. That title used to be held by Star Wars X-Wing First Edition, like 2015 era, but now I gotta give it up to Spearhead. Spearhead is really just a nice, fun, tight wargame. I play a lot of Warhammer 40,000. Warhammer is great. It's a very complex game, but it's really hard to know all the options I have available to me. Spearhead is pretty darn simple. It's a small board, 5 objectives, 6 twist cards, a deck of 15 objectives, 2 pieces of player placed terrain. Like, I can look at the game state and instantaneously know all of the options I have available to me, so I can make tactically sound or completely dumb decisions with confidence. If any of you guys want to get into Age of Sigmar Spearhead, we're giving away one of these Skaventide boxes. Leave a comment, let me know if you like the trees, the bones, or the graveyards best, and in the description you will find a form, and if you fill out that form, you'll be in the running to win a Skaventide box. Inside this box is the Skaven and the Stormcast, but more importantly, it has everything you need to play Spearhead. Ooh, in addition to which theme is coolest, let me know in the comments. I have 3 spearheads that I want to play, but I don't really want to buy because I don't like the models, and so I gotta somehow square that circle. But it's the Idoneth Deepkin, the Cities of Sigmar, and the Lumineth Realm Lords. I got some weird ideas of how I can make those happen, so let me know in the comments which one of those sounds the most interesting.